My brother Roger looked my 8-year-old daughter straight in the eyes and said the 6 words that would destroy our entire family. "You can't call me uncle anymore." I'm Janelle, and this happened just 3 weeks ago at what should have been a normal family barbecue, the kind where kids run through sprinklers and adults complain about property taxes. Instead, it became the day my 42-year-old brother decided to tell my adopted daughter, Gracie, that she wasn't real family because she didn't share our blood. Roger Whittaker owned 3 car dealerships, had a house with a pool that looked like something from a magazine. His wife Pauline wore designer everything, and their twin boys, Dakota and Braden, went to private school. My brother was the success story our parents, Frank and Lorraine, loved to brag about at church. But what happened 5 days later at his retirement party made everyone in our family realize they never really knew Roger Whittaker at all. See, while Roger was busy telling my daughter she wasn't real family, he was hiding a secret that would cost him his marriage, his business partners, and every single person who thought he stood for family values. The letters I sent to 47 people at that party didn't just expose him. They revealed that everything he'd built was based on the very lie he tried to weaponize against an 8-year-old girl. And the man who walked through those country club doors that evening, the one Roger had been paying $30,000 a year to disappear, that was just the beginning of how karma came to collect what was owed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a dental hygienist and her daughter brought down the most successful man in our family, and why he thanked us for it in the end. Life had finally started feeling stable for Gracie and me. After 3 years of fertility treatments that drained my savings and my marriage, my ex-husband David had walked out with the helpful parting words, "Maybe you're just not meant to be a mother." 2 years after the divorce, I walked into a foster care facility and met a 3-year-old girl with tight curls and eyes that had seen too much. Gracie didn't speak for the first month I had her. She just watched everything, like she was waiting for me to disappear too. Now, 5 years later, she was unstoppable. Honor roll student at Riverside Elementary, striker on her soccer team, the kid who made friendship bracelets for everyone in her class, including the boy who ate glue. She sang in the shower, badly but enthusiastically. She'd conquered her fear of the dark and now read under her covers with a flashlight I pretended not to know about. Every night when I tucked her in, she'd wrap her small arms around my neck and whisper, "Love you to the moon and back, Mama." Those moments made every struggle worth it. Our Sunday dinners at my parents' house in Oakwood had become the cornerstone of our week. Mom would start cooking at dawn, filling the house with the smell of pot roast and fresh bread. Dad would pretend to help while actually stealing bites and getting swatted with Mom's wooden spoon. It was a 35-year-old tradition that had survived divorces, job losses, and even my sister Colleen's brief vegan phase that nobody talked about anymore. The whole Whittaker family would pile into Mom's dining room by 2 o'clock sharp. Roger would arrive in whatever luxury car he was test driving that week, Pauline trailing behind with her contribution of store-bought pie she'd put on her own serving plate. The twins, Dakota and Braden, would thunder through the house like perpetually caffeinated tornadoes. Colleen drove up from the state university where she was finishing nursing school, usually exhausted but never missing a Sunday unless she had clinicals. Roger had always been the golden child, and I mean that without bitterness. While I was solidly middle-class comfortable with my dental hygienist salary and 2-bedroom apartment, Roger had built an empire. Started selling used cars at 19, owned his first lot by 25, and now at 42 had 3 dealerships with his face on billboards across 2 counties. "Whittaker Wheels, where family comes first," was his slogan, printed under his confident smile on every advertisement. But here's what the billboards didn't show. Roger was actually wonderful with Gracie, at least in the beginning. When I first brought her home, terrified I was going to somehow break this already fragile child, Roger had shown up at my apartment with a pink bicycle, complete with training wheels and handlebar streamers. He'd spent 3 hours teaching her to ride it in the parking lot, jogging beside her with his hand on the seat, his expensive dress shirt soaked with sweat. "Every kid needs a bike from their uncle," he'd said, grinning as Gracie finally pedaled 5 feet on her own before tipping into the grass. "Besides, Princess Gracie needs a proper royal carriage." That became their thing. He was Uncle Roger, and she was Princess Gracie. He'd bow dramatically when she entered a room. She'd curtsy back, usually while wearing her soccer uniform and light-up sneakers, which somehow made it even more charming. At Christmas, he bought her a plastic tiara from the dollar store that she treated like the crown jewels. At every family gathering, he'd make sure to announce, "Make way for Princess Gracie," and she'd beam like he'd given her the world. He'd take her to the dealership sometimes when I had to work Saturdays. She'd sit in every convertible pretending to drive while he made engine noises. His salespeople knew her by name. The guys in the service department kept a special stool for her so she could watch them work on cars. She'd come home covered in grease stains, chattering about carburetors and transmissions, words she didn't fully understand but repeated with authority. "Uncle Roger says I can sell cars too when I'm bigger," she'd announced one Sunday, mouth full of mashed potatoes. "He says I already know how to make people smile, and that's the most important part." "That's my girl," Roger had said, reaching over to high-five her with the hand that wore a Rolex worth more than my car. My parents adored the relationship. Mom would tear up watching them together, seeing her successful son embrace his role as uncle with such enthusiasm. Dad would nod approvingly, the way fathers do when they're proud but trying not to show it too much. Even Pauline seemed to soften during these moments, occasionally forgetting to check her phone or criticize the temperature of Mom's coffee. That's why what happened at the barbecue felt like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. All those moments, all that love we thought was real, crumbled with 6 words from the mouth of a man who'd spent years calling himself her uncle. It started at Roger's annual back-to-school barbecue, the last Saturday before school began. He threw it every year at his house, the one with the infinity pool and outdoor kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine. The invitation always said casual, but Pauline would still judge anyone who showed up in actual casual clothes. I'd learned to wear what I called suburban armor. Nice jeans, a blouse from Target that looked more expensive than it was, and the one pair of designer sandals I'd bought on clearance. The twins were showing off their new dirt bikes, bright red machines that cost more than I made in a month. They zipped around the manicured lawn while parents clutched their drinks and pretended not to notice when the boys nearly crashed into Pauline's prized rose bushes. Gracie watched them with the kind of longing only an 8-year-old can manage, her fingers twisted in the hem of her sundress. Finally, she gathered her courage and ran up to Roger, who was manning the grill in his monogrammed apron. She tugged on his polo shirt, the pink one that Pauline insisted brought out his eyes. "Uncle Roger, can I try Dakota's bike? Please? I'll be super careful, I promise." Roger kept flipping burgers, not even looking down. "The bikes are for family only, Gracie." She tilted her head, confused. "But I am family." That's when he turned, spatula still in hand, and delivered the words that would shatter everything. "No, you're not. You're adopted. You can't call me uncle anymore. That's for real nieces and nephews. Biological family." The backyard went silent. Even the twins stopped their bikes mid-ride, engines dying with a sputter. The only sound was meat sizzling on the grill, starting to burn. My mother dropped the bowl of potato salad she'd been carrying. It hit the patio with a crash, mayonnaise and potatoes exploding across the slate tiles. My father, who'd been laughing at something our neighbor had said, turned so fast he knocked over his beer. Pauline suddenly became fascinated with her phone screen, her perfectly manicured, fingers scrolling frantically through nothing. Gracie's face went through a transformation I'll never forget. Confusion shifted to understanding, then to a pain so raw it made my chest physically ache. "But you're my Uncle Roger," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You call me Princess Gracie." "I'm Janelle's brother," Roger said, turning back to his burning burgers as if he hadn't just destroyed a child's world. "That doesn't make me your uncle. You need to understand the difference. It's important to know who's really family and who isn't." Dakota, the older twin by 3 minutes, climbed off his bike. "Dad, that's mean." "It's not mean, it's honest," Roger replied, his voice taking on that lecturing tone he used in his commercials. "You and Braden have actual Whitaker blood. Gracie doesn't. The sooner everyone accepts that, the better." My father's jaw tightened the way it did when he was about to lose his temper, something that happened maybe once a decade. "Roger, what the hell has gotten into you?" "Nothing's gotten into me, Dad. The twins asked why she gets the same Christmas money they do when she's not really blood. Kids need to understand family structure. I'm doing Janelle a favor here. Better Gracie learns the truth now than builds her whole identity on a lie." "A lie?" I finally found my voice, though it came out strangled. "Loving her is a lie?" "That's not what I said," Roger sighed like I was being deliberately obtuse. "But calling her my niece when she's not? That's technically false. I deal in facts, Janelle. It's why I'm successful." Gracie pressed her face into my stomach, her small body shaking with sobs that she was trying desperately to muffle. I could feel her tears soaking through my blouse, hot and heartbroken. "We're leaving," I managed to say, scooping Gracie up even though she was getting almost too big to carry. "Oh, come on, Janelle, don't be dramatic," Roger called out, actually rolling his eyes. "She was going to figure it out eventually. Kids at school will tell her she's different. I'm preparing her for the real world." "The real world?" Colleen spoke up from where she'd been frozen by the pool. "The real world where uncles love their nieces regardless of how they joined the family?" "She's not my niece," Roger repeated, slower, like we were all stupid. "That's the whole point." My mother had knelt to clean up the spilled potato salad, her hands shaking. Now she stood, leaving the mess, and walked over to Roger. At 5'2", she had to crane her neck to look him in the eye. "I'm ashamed of you," she said quietly, and somehow that was worse than if she'd screamed. Deeply, profoundly ashamed. Then she turned and followed me to the car, my father right behind us, leaving Roger standing at his expensive grill with his burned burgers and his biological children, and his perfect wife who wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. For 3 days, I watched my daughter disappear into herself. She stopped, singing in the shower. She pushed her breakfast cereal around the bowl until it turned to mush. When her soccer coach called to ask why she'd quit mid-practice, I had no good answer. Her teacher, Mrs. Brennan, sent home a note saying Gracie had spent recess sitting alone against the building instead of playing with friends. "Sweetie, you want to talk about what happened?" I asked for the 10th time, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Am I not real?" she whispered into her pillow. "You're the realest, most wonderful person I know." "Then why doesn't Uncle Roger want me?" I had no answer that an 8-year-old could understand when I couldn't understand it myself. My mother came by every day, bringing Gracie's favorite cookies, new books, anything to coax a smile. Dad tried too, showing up with a model airplane kit they could build together, but Gracie just thanked them politely and retreated to her room. The light that made her Gracie was dimming, and I felt helpless to stop it. On Wednesday night, Colleen called. "I've been thinking about Roger's retirement party on Saturday." "I'm not going," I said immediately. "Neither is Gracie." "Hear me out. He's announcing his big transition, right? Stepping back from daily operations, keeping ownership but letting his partner run things while he plays golf and pretends to consult. So everyone who matters to him will be there. All his business associates, the country club crowd, his precious Chamber of Commerce buddies, everyone who thinks Roger Whittaker is Mr. Family Values." "Colleen, I'm not in the mood for revenge fantasies. This isn't fantasy. Remember when I worked at the courthouse during nursing school, filing papers, helping with records? Yeah? I still have friends there. Public records are public for a reason, Janelle. We could look into some things." "What kind of things?" "The kind of things someone obsessed with biological family might not want people to know." I should have said no. Should have taken the high road. But then I looked at Gracie's door, closed at 7:30 when she used to beg for just 5 more minutes before bed. "What did you have in mind?" Colleen came over after Gracie was asleep. We sat at my kitchen table with laptops and legal pads like we were planning a PTA fundraiser instead of our brother's downfall. What we found in the public records made my coffee go cold in my hands. "Oh my God," Colleen breathed. "Roger's adopted." The adoption decree was right there in black and white. Roger James Whittaker, adopted at 6 months old by Frank and Lorraine Whittaker. Original name, Roger James Hendricks. "Mom and Dad never told us," I said, stunned. "There's more." Colleen pulled up another document. "Look at these court filings. 5 years ago, someone named Carl Hendricks tried to contest a restraining order filed by Roger Whittaker, the same Roger Whittaker who owns 3 dealerships. We kept digging. Property records showed Roger had been making payments on a rundown house across the state, owned by one Carl Hendricks. Employment records from the dealership subpoenaed in a wrongful termination lawsuit showed irregular consulting payments to a company called CH Holdings, registered to the same Carl Hendricks. He's been paying his biological father to stay away, I said. Roger found his birth father and has been hiding him, while telling your daughter she's not real family. The next morning, I made a decision. I wrote 47 letters, one for every person on the guest list for Roger's retirement party. Pauline had given me access to the dealership's database years ago for a school fundraiser, and she'd never changed the password. I personalized each letter, addressing them by name, referencing their connection to Roger. Each letter contained the same information: Roger's adoption records, the payments to Carl Hendricks, and a simple question: if Roger believes adopted children aren't real family, what does that make him? But I didn't want to just mail them. That felt too passive, too easy to ignore. So I did something else. I called Carl Hendricks. He answered on the third ring, voice rough with cigarette smoke. Yeah? Mr. Hendricks, you don't know me, but I'm Roger Whittaker's sister, his adopted sister, actually, though apparently that means I'm not his real sister, according to him. There was a long pause. He said that? He said that to my 8-year-old adopted daughter, told her she couldn't call him uncle anymore because she's not biological family. Another pause. Then, that boy always was ashamed of where he came from. Guess he's ashamed of what he became too. Would you like to come to his retirement party as my guest? Carl Hendricks laughed, bitter and knowing. Lady, I've been waiting 15 years for someone to ask me that. The retirement party was everything Roger would have wanted. Elegant, expensive, and designed to impress. The country club's ballroom gleamed with crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths. A jazz quartet played softly in the corner, while servers in bow ties circulated with champagne and shrimp that cost more per pound than I made in an hour. Roger stood at the podium in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Pauline beside him in a dress that definitely did. Thank you all for coming, Roger began, his salesman's smile at full wattage. When I started selling cars at 19, I had nothing but ambition and a belief in family values. I stood in the back with Gracie, who'd insisted on coming despite everything. She wore her favorite purple dress and held my hand tight. My parents flanked us, Dad's jaw set, and Mom clutching her purse like a weapon. Everything I've built, Roger continued, raising his champagne glass, has been for family. Real family. Blood family. That's what matters in this world. Knowing where you come from, who you really are, and preserving that legacy for the next generation. That's when the first phone buzzed, then another, then dozens. A symphony of notifications as my courier service delivered 47 letters simultaneously. Pauline was checking her phone when her assistant handed her an envelope. She opened it absently, still listening to Roger's speech about authentic bloodlines and genetic legacy. I watched her face change as she read, color draining until her expensive foundation looked like a mask on white paper. The Whittaker name means something in this community, Roger was saying. It means integrity. It means knowing exactly who you are and never pretending to be something you're not. Roger, Pauline's voice cut through his speech like a knife. What is this? She held up the letter, hand trembling. The microphone picked up Roger's confused laugh. Honey, I'm in the middle of... You're adopted? The words echoed through the ballroom's perfect acoustics. You've been adopted this whole time and never told me? Never told our children? The room erupted. Every guest was reading their letter now, voices rising in confusion and disbelief. Roger's business partner, Mitchell Stevens, stood up so fast his chair fell backward. You've been embezzling from the company? Mitchell's voice boomed. These payments to CH Holdings, that's fraud, Roger. I can explain, Roger started, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of the ballroom doors opening. Carl Hendricks walked in wearing an ill-fitting suit that had probably been in style 20 years ago. His face was weathered, lined by hard living, but his eyes, they were Roger's eyes, unmistakably. He tried to slick back his gray hair, and his hands shook slightly, but he walked with purpose straight toward the podium. Hello, son, Carl said, his rough voice carrying in the now silent room. Got a call saying you were finally ready to acknowledge where you really come from. Roger's face cycled through emotions like a slot machine. Shock, rage, fear, And finally, naked panic. "You can't be here. I have a restraining order." "Expired 2 years ago," Carl said mildly. "You kept paying me anyway. Guess you were too scared to check." Dakota, one of the twins, stood up from the kids' table. "Dad, who is that?" "That's your grandfather," Pauline said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Your biological grandfather that your father has been paying $30,000 a year to pretend doesn't exist." My father walked to the podium, took the microphone from Roger's unresisting hand. The room watched Frank Whitaker, respected retired principal, grandfather and man of uncommon dignity, clear his throat. "My son Roger was adopted when he was 6 months old," Dad said clearly. "His mother Lorraine and I chose him, loved him, raised him as our own because that's what family does. We never told him he was adopted because to us, it didn't matter. He was our son, period." He looked directly at Gracie then, his eyes soft. "Just like Gracie is my granddaughter. Period. No qualifiers, no explanations, no blood tests needed." Then Dad turned back to Roger, and his softness turned to steel. "But you, Roger, have spent so much energy hiding who you are that you forgot who you could have been. You hurt an innocent child to protect your own shame. You stole from your business to hide your truth. You lied to your wife, your children, everyone who trusted you." The business associates were already leaving, phones pressed to ears, probably calling lawyers. Mitchell Stevens pointed at Roger. "We're done. The partnership is dissolved. You'll be hearing from our attorneys about the embezzlement." "Wait," Roger said desperately. "Please, just let me explain." But the exodus had begun. Within minutes, only family remained in the echoing ballroom. Roger stood at the podium like a captain on a sinking ship, still gripping the edges as if they could keep him afloat. Pauline walked up to him, removed her wedding ring, and placed it on the podium. 15 years of marriage, and I never knew who you really were." "I'm still me," Roger whispered. "No," she said. "You're exactly who you've always been. I just finally see it." Roger's empire crumbled faster than anyone expected. Within a week, 3 business partners had pulled out completely. The fraud investigation began the following Monday. Pauline filed for separation, taking the twins to her mother's house in Connecticut. Not because he was adopted, she made that clear in every conversation, but because he'd lied for their entire marriage, stolen money, and destroyed an innocent child's sense of belonging to protect his own ego. The twins, confused and angry, started asking the questions Roger had always feared. "Why did Dad hurt Gracie if he's adopted too?" Dakota asked me over the phone. "Doesn't that make him a hypocrite?" Even at 10 years old, he could see what his father couldn't. Carl Hendricks surprised everyone. The man Roger had painted as a monster, worth $30,000 a year to keep hidden, turned out to be remarkably decent. Yes, he'd made mistakes. He'd been in and out of prison in his 20s, struggled with addiction, made choices he regretted. But he'd gotten clean 12 years ago, found faith, and had been respecting Roger's wishes to stay away despite desperately wanting to know his son. "I would have been proud to know him," Carl told me over coffee a week after the party. His hands were steady now, wrapped around a ceramic mug. "Successful businessman, family man, all of it. But not like this. Not as someone who hurts children to protect himself." He'd been working as a janitor at a community center, living quietly, never once threatening to expose Roger despite having every legal right to reach out. The payments Roger made? Carl had been donating most of them to a foster care charity. "Figured if my boy didn't want me, maybe I could help some other kids who needed it," he said simply. 2 months after the party, Roger showed up at my apartment. He'd lost weight, his expensive clothes replaced with jeans and a plain t-shirt. The Mercedes was gone, replaced with a 10-year-old Toyota. He looked older, humbled, more like the brother I'd grown up with before success changed him. Gracie hid behind me when she saw him at the door. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice broke. For the first time in my life, I watched my proud, successful brother cry. Not the controlled tears of a man protecting his image, but the messy, painful sobs of someone finally facing himself. I was so terrified of being rejected for not being real family that I rejected her first, he managed between breaths. I became everything I was afraid of. I turned into the monster I thought everyone would see if they knew the truth. "Tell her, not me," I said, stepping aside. Roger dropped to his knees on my doorstep, meeting Gracie at eye level. "Princess Gracie, I'm so sorry. You're my niece. You've always been my niece. I was scared and stupid and cruel. I hurt you because I was hurting, and that's unforgivable. But if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life making it up to you." Gracie stood there for a long moment, 8 years old and wiser than any of us deserved. Then she said, "Everybody makes mistakes. That's what Mommy says. But you have to mean you're sorry." "I mean it," Roger whispered. "I mean it more than I've ever meant anything." She hugged him then, and I watched my brother break down completely, holding my daughter like she was keeping him from drowning. Roger's rebuilding his life now, piece by piece. He sold his remaining stake in the dealerships to pay back what he'd taken. He lives in a small apartment, works as a sales manager at someone else's dealership. But here's the remarkable part. He seems happier. He volunteers at the foster care charity Carl had been supporting, sharing his story with older kids aging out of the system. "Family is who shows up for you," he tells them, "not whose DNA you share." I learned that the hardest way possible. Last Sunday at dinner, I watched Roger push Gracie on the swing set he'd insisted on installing in our parents' backyard with his own hands. She was laughing, calling out, "Higher, Uncle Roger, higher," like the past 6 months hadn't happened, like forgiveness could be that simple. Mom came up beside me, squeezing my hand. "You saved him, you know." "I destroyed his life, Mom." "No, honey, you revealed it. The truth always comes out. But this way, Gracie learned the most important lesson of all." "What's that?" "That being chosen makes you more family, not less. And that standing up for yourself and the people you love is never wrong, no matter who you're standing up to." As I watched my brother and my daughter together, I realized we all carry secrets about belonging. Roger's mistake wasn't being adopted. It was believing that made him less worthy of love. Gracie never doubted her worth because we never gave her reason to. That's the difference between shame and love. Shame makes you smaller, meaner, desperate to tear others down. Love makes you bigger, braver, strong enough to lift others up. My brother had to lose everything to learn that. But seeing him now pushing my daughter on that swing, both of them laughing in the afternoon sun, maybe that's exactly what needed to happen. Family isn't blood. It's the choice to show up again and again, especially after you've fallen. And we're all still choosing each other, one Sunday dinner at a time. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like you didn't belong or knew someone who made you feel that way, I want you to know that chosen family is real family. The love we choose to give and receive is the most powerful force in the world. It can survive betrayal, weather storms of shame, and come out stronger on the other side. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they belong, exactly as they are. Leave a comment about your own chosen family, the people who show up for you regardless of DNA. And subscribe to this channel for more stories about the complicated, messy, beautiful truth of what makes a family real. Because at the end of the day, we're all just people choosing to love each other, and that choice is what makes us family.